You think you know how to garden? You're wrong. For 1,000 years, monks across the world had a secret playbook: underground heating, geometric mastery, and techniques so smart they would bankrupt modern big ag. We're unearthing 15 of their forgotten methods right now, starting with a winter miracle: the underground greenhouse, secrets of the subterranean thermal channels. The air outside was frozen, the medieval night bitter, but inside the cloister walls, life was secretly thriving. It was a green defiance of winter, and it was all thanks to a system of ingenuity hidden just meters beneath the monks' feet. Before the age of the glass greenhouse or the electric heater, certain monastic orders utilized subterranean thermal channels to create their own warm microclimates. This was knowledge inherited in part from the Romans, who used hypocaust devices to heat their villas. Monks repurposed this ancient wisdom, building narrow passages and tunnels, often running parallel to the garden beds above. These stone channels trapped heat deep underground, protecting the delicate roots and leaves of medicinal plants from harsh frost and cold stress. This was no short-term fix. It required skilled masons and institutional funding, resources the average peasant farmer simply did not possess. But for the monasteries, access to fresh herbs was essential for running their infirmaries year-round. This system allowed them to dramatically extend the growing seasons for critical species, ensuring a constant supply of remedies even when snow was on the ground. It was an energy-free method of climate control, a kind of earth-powered central heating. Today we rely on expensive power to heat our plastic tunnels, often failing after one season. Back then, they used intelligence and durable stonework, creating perennial systems that lasted longer than the monasteries themselves. It's an incredible example of self-sufficiency. But these channels were just one part of a larger, carefully protected ecosystem. To truly lock away their botanical secrets, the monks needed walls above ground too. Hortus conclusus, the secret walled garden, as pharmacy. Step inside the monastery walls and the air instantly changes, filling with a powerful, concentrated scent of rosemary, sage, and basil. This wasn't just a garden, it was a sanctuary of healing, known in Latin as the Hortus conclusus, the enclosed garden. The massive walls surrounding these plots served multiple brilliant purposes. Naturally, they protected the precious medicinal herbs from thieves and wild animals. But the real genius was in their engineering. The thick stone provided thermal mass, absorbing the sun's heat during the day and radiating it back out at night. This created a significantly warmer, less windy microclimate, allowing the monks to successfully cultivate sensitive species that otherwise wouldn't survive the climate. Following the principle of ruriat labora, pray and work, monks spent specific ritualized hours tending to their plants, understanding that the health of the body and the soul were deeply intertwined. These gardens were their laboratories, allowing them to manage and experiment with rare species on a scale that local farmers could only dream of. The pharmacy was not an add-on. It was the entire garden, providing the necessary ingredients to create ointments, fermented tonics, and poultices. While the modern supermarket offers packaged medicine, medieval families relied on the local monastery for their powerful elixirs. The commitment to structured labor and institutional stability gave the monks an incredible advantage. But the ancient wisdom they used wasn't just structural. Sometimes it was cosmic, sacred geometry. When gardens were built like mandalas, imagine walking into a garden where every path, every flower bed, and every corner was laid out according to the laws of the universe. While European gardens focused on simple squares, Asian monastic communities built farms that were works of geometric and spiritual art. Rooted in the ancient Indian science of Vastu Shastra, which translates literally to the science of dwelling. These gardens utilized the mandala, a concentric spiritual symbol. Monks adapted these designs, creating stunning, precise layouts that were functional as well as sacred. This wasn't just decorative, it was highly efficient farming. By arranging the plots in concentric or radial patterns, the monks ingeniously created windbreaks, heat traps, and shade gradients within the same small space. Stone pathways traced the precise geometry, while carefully selected plants worked together in perfect harmony. The philosophy was that blending high practicality with spirituality led to harmony with cosmic forces. While a local peasant might have used simple mandala-like seed patterns for better yields, the monasteries had the resources and knowledge to build vast, permanent structures. Today, We plant in endless uniform rows, prioritizing access over environment. The forgotten wisdom of Vastu Shastra reminds us that the most beautiful garden can also be the most bountiful. This commitment to careful planning extended beyond the layout of the beds. The monks understood that the true secret to longevity wasn't just where you planted, but what you planted and how you guarded its future. The plant whisperers. Monastic seed. Banking and exchange. If the garden was the library of life, the monks were its meticulous librarians, guarding the future of every species in silent dedication. They knew that true agricultural power lay not just in the harvest, but in the seed. Medieval monasteries institutionalized seed collection and storage on an unprecedented scale. After harvests, seeds were carefully cleaned, dried to prevent mold, and then stored in ideal dry environments, clay jars, leather pouches, or waxed parchment packets tucked away in attics or cellars. Crucially, they kept the stock rotating, ensuring the seeds were always fresh and viable. This gave them an enormous advantage, reducing dependence on external markets and securing rare or exotic medicinal plants. But the real genius was the monastic exchange network. What began as local seed saving evolved into a vast, whispering trade route spanning the entire continent. Benedictine, Cistercian, and Cluniac houses weren't just cultivating plants. They were sharing them through pilgrimage and court networks. We're talking about a web of thousands of monasteries, stretching from the hot deserts of Egypt all the way to frozen Scandinavia, exchanging guarded secrets and making it possible to grow plants like frankincense and myrrh in new locations. In a time of famine and instability, the Church provided the stability to create the world's first true seed banks. Today we rely on a few large corporations for our genetics. Back then, they relied on a bond of knowledge, but not all their wisdom was kept on earth. Some of it came from the heavens. Lunar liturgy, planting by the holy moon calendar. It's late, the monastery is quiet, but two figures stand in the garden, consulting a chart lit by a sputtering lamp. They aren't looking at the soil. They are looking at the stars, linking the blessings of the earth with the mysteries of the cosmos. Monastic orders promoted a highly regimented life, praying at specific hours and adhering to strict fasts. It was only natural to integrate their farming into this precise schedule, giving birth to liturgical moon gardening. The monks didn't just look at the phases of the moon, they consulted something called the Computus chart, a massive calendar they used for everything from calculating Easter to knowing the exact moment to put seed to soil. They merged lunar rules with feast day scheduling to determine the perfect moment to plant seeds. They even connected the moon's influence to the medieval understanding of the body's four humors. The belief was that proper harvest timing, dictated by the moon, would actually improve the humoral potency of the medicinal herbs they used to heal the sick. This wasn't just ancient folklore. It was a cohesive system recorded in surviving monastic calendars. Today we rely on digital timers, timed irrigation, and moisture sensors for our every agricultural move. We've forgotten the wisdom of hitching our wagon to the cosmos. While modern science debates its effectiveness, planting by the moon was a profound ritual. However, in the East, a different wisdom was at work: coexistence. The wabi-sabi lawn, why Zen monks cultivated moss. For the average American homeowner, moss is a curse, an ugly sign of moisture and decay to be eradicated with chemicals. But in the ancient gardens of Japan, Zen monks saw something entirely different, a sign of beautiful, quiet age. This was the art of moss cultivation, a practice tied to the Japanese ideal of wabi-sabi, which cherishes transience and imperfection. While European monasteries focused on subduing nature and storing seeds, the Japanese sought to coexist with it, finding aesthetic and spiritual value in this seemingly useless plant. Monks developed a strong custodial ethos, carefully selecting and transplanting various moss species to match specific microenvironments, one type for dry rocks, another for wet crevices. The value wasn't just spiritual, it was practical. Moss purifies the air by absorbing toxins, with just half a square meter capable of absorbing up to 2 pounds of carbon dioxide. It also contributes to the beautiful, muted colors of stone in the garden. Today, growing moss is seen as a difficult, esoteric endeavor, reserved mostly for specialized royal estates or the most dedicated enthusiasts. This tradition reminds us that a garden's beauty isn't measured by its perfectly manicured uniformity, but by its ability to embrace the natural world. This was a form of patient, aesthetic planning, but other monastic gardens were planned with mathematical precision. The chessboard garden, 16-bed physic garden. Rotation, forget the sprawling chaos of a simple kitchen garden. The most organized monastic plots looked more like a meticulously planned game of chess. Every plant had a purpose, and every plot had a schedule. The most famous example comes from the architectural drawing known as the Plan of St. Gall, which showed the monastic herb garden divided into a neat, revolving matrix of 16 beds. This wasn't guesswork. It was a scientifically sound system of crop rotation. The monks rotated the beds yearly to avoid nutrient depletion and pathogen buildup, believing that soil exhaustion would weaken the virtue of the medicinal herbs. This mathematical precision wasn't just for the soil's health, though. The herbal gardens were strategically located immediately next to the infirmary, significantly reducing harvest time for emergency patients. In a crisis, the apothecary didn't have to panic. He knew exactly where the specific ingredients, like rue or sage, were growing in their wattle-fenced square beds. Fresh infusions could be prepared within minutes. Ordinary farmers lacked the medicinal knowledge and manpower to manage such intensive rotation. Today, the principles of rotation are making a comeback in modern gardening, but the monks' commitment to this systematic near-military structure was unique. Meanwhile, on the other side of the world, others were practicing a sophisticated form of farming that started with water. Rice paddies and protein. Japanese terraced aquaculture. In the steep, rugged mountains of Japan, farmers were forced to carve flat terraces into hillsides just to grow rice. But with isolated communities desperate for protein, they realized the water itself could become a farm. This was the forgotten practice of terraced aquaculture, an ingenious form of rice-fish integration. Farmers introduced common carp and medeca fish into the interconnected springs, ponds, and small canals that fed their rice paddies. The fish were an essential addition to the diet, providing a reliable protein source where meat was scarce. The genius, however, was in the symbiotic relationship. The fish fed on pests, reducing the need for other interventions, and their waste fertilized the rice. This was a completely integrated system, far beyond simple farming. But the complexity of managing these interconnected water rights in large infrastructures required total community involvement. This is where temples and shrines stepped in, using their credibility and sometimes their control of the land to bring people together and build the necessary stone retaining walls and clay linings. It was a brilliant example of utilizing geography and necessity to create a self-sustaining ecosystem. Today, modern aquaponics utilizes these same principles, combining fish tanks with hydroponic plant beds. But we forgot the medieval masters who first perfected this system. Meanwhile, European monks were using another form of subterranean farming to solve their protein problem: the cave harvest, year-round mushroom cultivation. In the early 19th century, as job opportunities shifted, desperate French farmers began looking for a miracle, and they found it right beneath their feet. They were about to uncover the secret of the cave harvest. Around Paris, abandoned limestone and gypsum quarries provided the perfect year-round conditions for growing the Agaricus bisporus, the common button mushroom. High humidity, cool, stable temperatures, and low light. Monks quickly saw the value, sometimes offering access to the subterranean galleries underneath their monastic properties. For religious orders that often forbade the eating of meat, mushrooms became a vital protein source, with a single button containing up to 5 grams of protein per 100 grams. These caves were nature's own sophisticated indoor farm, naturally trapping moisture and reducing losses from evaporation without the need for complex technology. What started as small enterprises by market gardeners and quarry workers became a revolutionary way to feed a rapidly urbanizing population. Today, we try to recreate these ideal, stable conditions using massive buildings and climate control. We call it vertical farming. But we forget that the most effective year-round protein source was discovered by simply embracing the cool, dark stability of the earth itself. It was farming born of necessity, much like another system that gave them food during the long religious fasts. The medieval stew, closed-loop water, and nutrient systems. The sound of rustling leaves and moving water defined the outer edges of the monastery. But if you asked a medieval monk for stew, he wouldn't bring you a bowl of soup. He'd point you to the fish pond. A stew pond was the medieval name for a walled fish pond, a sophisticated live storage system where carp, pike, and other fish were kept fresh until needed in the kitchen. For orders that strictly observed fasts, abstaining from eating meat for large parts of the year, these ponds were essential. They gave the abbeys a reliable, year-round protein source that complied with religious law. By the High Middle Ages, monks had perfected a brilliant closed-loop system. These multi-tiered ponds would feed water to the garden cisterns and headers during the fall. But the true secret was discovered at the bottom. The nutrient-rich muck, or sludge, was prized as a powerful organic soil amendment. Scraped from the pond floor, this material breathed new life into vegetable beds, orchards, and herbal gardens. It was a zero-waste operation, where the fish fed the monks and fertilized the land. Massive grange networks later adopted this system, realizing the efficiency of this water storage and nutrient loop. Today, modern aquaponics uses the same principles, proving this ancient technique was pure genius. These ponds show that monastic labor was not just about growing food, but about sustaining knowledge. The monk's legacy: praying and working the land. We often picture monks as figures lost in quiet seclusion, but their real contribution to the medieval world was rooted in sweat and practical skill. The monk was not just a contemplative, he was a master farmer, an engineer, and a herbalist. The guiding principle of Western monasticism was ora et labora, meaning pray and work. This wasn't just a suggestion, it was a structured routine that dictated specific hours for active, structured labor. Gardening and caring for the sick were considered vital habits that established harmony. The act of coaxing life from the soil, of pruning and tending the vine, was a prayer in and of itself. During the Dark Ages, when centralized power collapsed and knowledge was often lost, the monasteries became vital conservators of skill. They were the living libraries of the medieval world. They maintained the institutional stability, the educational roots, and the financial power necessary to invest in long-term projects like stonework, intricate irrigation, and advanced farming methods that the average peasant could not afford. They kept alive Roman masonry techniques, water management principles, and complex botanical knowledge. Their commitment wasn't to profit, but to spiritual self-sufficiency. They weren't just feeding themselves, they were preserving the agricultural knowledge of an entire continent. But in their carefully curated gardens, they were also managing some dangerously powerful plants. The forgotten herb, mandrake, colocynth, and other ancient elixirs. The local farmer grew parsley and onions, but behind the monastery walls, the garden held secrets that could save a life, or take it. Monks weren't just cultivating simple herbs, they were masters of the powerful and often toxic plants of the ancient world. While peasants knew basic remedies, only the monastic scholars had. The deep recorded knowledge required to manage species like mandrake, colocynth, henna, and wormwood. These were not plants you handled casually. They required precise preparation to turn from poison into cure. The monastery pharmacy became the ultimate laboratory, uniquely positioned to exhaustively record specific chemical behaviors that allowed them to perfect ointments, tonics, and poultices no local could reliably produce. This knowledge was built on ritual dedication. Leaves were dried only on holy days, and tinctures were brewed with rhythmic prayer chants, reinforcing the discipline needed to handle dangerous, potent ingredients safely. Their institutional stability gave them the longevity to experiment over centuries, accumulating a body of expertise that was unmatched. Today we buy standardized medications sealed in uniform packaging, but not so long ago, true medicinal power resided in a monk's ability to tame the wild plants. This profound knowledge was a source of great healing, but it was also a source of great power that wasn't always shared. Stone-cold knowledge. The secrets they didn't share. For the average peasant, farming knowledge was local and basic. It was about subsistence. But for the monks, knowledge was power, and some of their most advanced techniques were guarded behind massive stone walls for a reason. The monastic orders had incredible institutional advantages that local farmers lacked. They had the political power, access to skilled masons, and the financial stability to invest in structures that would last for centuries. When they built the subterranean thermal channels or the elaborate walls of the Hortus Conclusus, they weren't just farming. They were executing an expensive long-term engineering project that guaranteed their institutional wealth for centuries. This meant that the sophisticated knowledge required for these projects, things like advanced water management and Hippocaust principles, wasn't readily shared. While they sometimes exchanged simple seeds with locals, their proprietary secrets, particularly those concerning the infirmary's operations and the intensive cultivation of rare medicinal plants, remained locked away. The monks prioritized their own self-sufficiency and their mission to care for their community, and that required control. The result was a contrast. A wealth of basic farming wisdom circulated widely, but the advanced guarded knowledge that made the monasteries truly resilient was kept under institutional control. This allowed them to become beacons of agricultural innovation that stretched far beyond their local village. From Egypt to Iceland, the global reach of the gardens. These weren't just local plots of dirt. The monastery gardens were connected by an invisible, knowledge-based highway spanning thousands of miles. The agricultural secrets of the monks traveled the world, proving that their network was truly global. The strength of the established monastic orders, Benedictine, Cistercian, Cluniac, allowed them to adapt farming methods to the most extreme environments. Through their vast exchange networks, knowledge, and rare seeds, they made the impossible possible. Think of Icelandic and Norwegian monasteries, where they successfully cultivated medicinal plants in climates where local farmers struggled just to grow basics. In the south, Coptic monasteries in the Egyptian deserts used these same trade routes to transport and cultivate valuable imports like frankincense and myrrh, which were essential for their rituals but did not grow locally. This was a sophisticated, low-cost logistics system powered by a shared commitment to botanical preservation. The entire web was like thousands of monasteries whispering guarded secrets to each other, passing on the knowledge of soil, rotation, and seed banking across borders and empires. This ability to share, adapt, and conserve plants made the monastic garden the most resilient form of agriculture in the world. And that resilience leaves us with a profound final lesson: the simple truth. A prayer in the soil. After centuries of hidden channels, moon charts, and mathematical rotations, the monastic legacy leaves us with one simple, enduring truth. It's a philosophy we need most in our hurried modern age: reverence. The monks understood that their work was a form of devotion. Their gardens weren't factories. They were laboratories of time and spiritual growth, where the cultivation of food, medicine, and the soul were inseparable acts. The ultimate purpose of all their complex techniques, the seed banking, the thermal channels, the rotation systems, was not just survival, but the patient pursuit of self-sufficiency. They treated the ground not as a resource to be exploited, but as a sacred partner. Their practice was built on the commitment to the long term, investing 3 years for an asparagus bed or waiting decades for a well-established grape arbor. That quiet ceremony, the intentional act of serving the meal, the ritual of the final cut, was a visual confirmation of their pride and their respect for the entire process. It honored the wisdom of the ingredients and the tradition of the hearth. Today we seek instant results, forgetting that the health of the soil is a long-term investment. But the practice of monastic gardening shows us that treating the ground beneath our feet with reverence and grace is not just good farming. It's a forgotten way of life that promises resilience, self-sufficiency, and a quiet victory over the hurry of the modern world. The resilience of the monastic garden is the quiet victory we need today. If you want more forgotten wisdom that unlocks self-sufficiency, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to Stellar Eureka for more deep dives into history's hidden knowledge.